my area in Shelby County, particularly North Shelby, we've got a major shortage of workers in food services and hotels in skilled areas in some ways as far as the hotel process, but
Absolutely.
just general entry areas with most of those restaurants and things. And it's really becoming such that their wages are where I heard many people say, well, it's going to go up just because of the natural situation of our economy. It went on up, and people are getting $15 an hour. I
Hmm.
mean, they're getting all kinds of benefits. So, I mean, that's
And
good to know.
and
That's what that process is, because there's always that conversation about changing the minimum wage, but
right.
we're way beyond that minimum wage now.
And you know that most of those fast food or restaurant type businesses are small business people. And so at a point, it becomes, can I afford to bring on two more people, or do I have to? I've got restaurants in my area that have had to close at least one day a week because they couldn't get the workers they needed to stay operational for a 6-day week or a
Lots
5-day.
of them are closing early. You know, they'll
Closing
close at
early,
3
closing one, yeah.
instead of staying up until 5 or 6.
And
That's
that
right.
gets into your productivity as well. So the ones that are able to work are working more hours, but you know, you're,
Exactly.
so yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Commissioner, you ready?
It's
Now, I'm not near as smart as Kurt, and this is my first time I've had an opportunity to come and visit with y'all in the 5 years I've been commissioner, so I'll do my best to provide some good information. But
We thought it was time, Mr.
yeah,
Commissioner.
that's right. Well, it's good to be here. Good to be here with you, and good to see a lot of friendly faces up there, and a lot of friends of conservation, friends of our state parks, and I appreciate
Don't
y'all's
be
support.
fooled.
I say I'm Chris Blanchard, the Commissioner of the Department of Conservation, and I do have a few people with me today. I just want to introduce them. I think some of you get a chance to interact with them on a pretty regular basis, but I just want to make sure you know a good part of our team at DCNR. Ed Poulos is our Deputy Commissioner. Ed's here with us today. Charlana Skaggs is our General Counsel. Joseph Ossington is our Chief Financial Officer. And Juliana Dean is another attorney in our legal section with the department. Does a lot of different things for us there. So glad to be here with you today. And talking with Senator Albritton, part of the opportunity to be here is to share a little bit about our department. And I know we work with all of y'all on a lot of different things, but not everybody realizes what all we do in the Department of Conservation and what, if we work with you on something that's hunting and fishing or state parks, but the department is extremely diverse. And we have a great staff and really have a good opportunity to do some good things in our state that benefit not only the natural resources, but the people of our state. I'd like to start out just with a kind of an overview of the department and the importance of the work that's done and how blessed we are in Alabama to live in a state that has great outdoor recreational opportunities. Outdoor recreation in Alabama is a $14 billion direct impact supporting 135,000 jobs. I mean, it is a big economic engine for our state, especially in a lot of the rural communities where outdoor recreation plays a big part in the economy there. And this really just the direct cost. It doesn't include the indirect benefits like quality of life, retaining a workforce here, retaining the ability to retain some people after they graduate from college, or people that come to our state to attract a workforce here. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation about workforce development and using outdoor recreation as a tool. Just a quick overview about the department. We have our state parks division, which is, have 21 state parks. We manage those all over the state. Our wildlife freshwater fisheries division, which most people consider to be the Department of Conservation, all the hunting and fishing, the biological work, the enforcement staff. Our marine resources division, which is down the coast, just in Mobile and Baldwin counties, where we handle all the commercial and recreational saltwater fishing and other programs. Our state lands division, which manages the Forever Wild program, all the oil and gas leasing. We have a database of state properties that they manage for other groups. And then the Deepwater Horizon Oil Spill Restoration section. That's kind of as a new section that we created in the last few years to help manage all of the funding that comes through the department from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. I'm not going to read all these slides. I'm going to roll through these pretty quick, just to kind of an overview of the department and some things that might be of interest to you. But we do have 21 state parks, about 48,000 acres around the state. I'll leave this map up here for just a second. These are the state parks that are managed by the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. These are not all of what people call state parks are DCNR state parks. This doesn't include Tanny Hill, Briarfield, Blakely, Fort Morgan, Old Cahaba, Little River State Forest. We have Gufka State Forest. Those are all managed by other departments or agencies. Some of them have their own commission, like Blakely has a Blakely State Park Commission. And so these are the ones that, the 21 that we manage in the Department of Conservation. And we host about 6 million people, about 6.2 million people. We've seen that's about a 20% increase since the pandemic in the amount of visitations to our parks. As you see, we have 2 cave parks. I hope that you will have taken the opportunity to visit Rickwood Caverns and Cathedral Caverns. If you haven't, those are 2 pretty spectacular places, very different caves, but be a good, especially in the summertime in Alabama, to go in the caves about 60 degrees. That's a pretty good way to spend a few hours. But the one thing on the very bottom of this slide, the $80 million bond for Alabama State Parks was approved on the ballot in May. And I want to thank you for your support of that and passing that 2 years ago so that it would be on, and it was on the ballot this year with overwhelming support. Over 70-something% of the people in the state supported that. So one of the things the senator asked me was to talk a little bit about the bond projects. We are working with the finance director now to go through the bond selling process. Hope to have that completed sometime around November, looking at the timeline for all of the steps it takes to do that before we'll have the bonds sale completed. But some things that we're planning to do, and we have a lot of the engineering and design work already underway for some of these projects, so that when the proceeds are realized, we will be able to bid that and move into construction very quickly on many of the state park improvement projects. We plan campground renovations at some parks, and at some parks we plan new or expanded campground areas. Where we have a lot of excess demand. One of those is Gulf State Park. Gulf State Park has about 500 campsites. Those campsites say 90 to 100% full most of the months of the year. So we have a lot of excess demand there. So we're going to try and add about 200 more campsites in Gulf State Park. New rental cottages and cabins. We have several of our parks that, in your districts, that don't have cabins. And we have a campground, or we have different things, but we don't have that as an opportunity. And we have a lot of demand for that in different parks. Our day use area renovation, some new accessible playgrounds. Some of our playgrounds were built a long time ago, and still have merry-go-rounds and some of the swings that may not be as conducive for all of our citizens to be able to enjoy. So we'll be expanding that. And like I said, the 2 cave parks, they do need some love at to make them more usable for people. And then Wi-Fi build out and upgrades. We have gotten fiber to all 21 of our parks. We've worked to build out the fiber network to our parks, which was, as you all know, with rural broadband, is a massive undertaking. So now we have fiber to every park, and we're building out the Wi-Fi networks within the park so that people that want connectivity can have it. There's some people that want to go to parks and turn their phone off, and there's some people that run businesses from our campgrounds from their $500,000 motorhome, and we need to be able to provide that for everybody. And the bathhouse renovations, expansion, and then camper cabins. That's something that I do want to point out. There's a lot of segment in the camping industry that don't own RVs. They don't want to tent camp. And a lot of the millennials, they'd like to, these are like tiny houses, and they would like to stay in the campground, but they don't have an RV. And this will give us the ability to meet the needs of that sector. Our plan is to do a design build competition with some of the manufacturing housing companies in our state to have a couple of state park official models of camper cabins, so that they're uniform across our parks, but then also to utilize Alabama businesses to be able to to build these for us. Lodge and hotel renovations at several of our resort hotels. And then the last thing on the list is water and sewer utility upgrades. Those are not exciting things when you talk with the public about that, but if they flush their toilet and doesn't have anywhere to go, or they can't get water, that is a big deal. And so we are working with our partners at ADM and others to help us with some water, sewer, and utility upgrades throughout our parks, and plan to use some bond proceeds for that. And I'm just going to run through some very quick stats. We have 40 wildlife management areas that we manage, over 700,000 acres. We have 12 shooting ranges around the state. Some of those are smaller, and some of the rural areas, some a little bit bigger. We have big plans to expand those. We have 20 community archery parks. We lead the country in archery parks. I think the next closest state is Kentucky, and they have about 10. So we're kicking everybody's behind on archery parks because we see that as a great gateway for all economic groups of people to be able to get into the outdoors. And the Archery in Schools program is a great way to get those people enjoying the outdoors and make them lifelong participants in the outdoors. We have 23 public fishing lakes. These are very rural. Most of these are in our rural counties where they were built in the 30s and 40s for subsistence fishing for people, and now they're becoming extremely popular, especially the last couple of years of people wanting to get out in the outdoors in their counties. We manage more than 150 boat ramps, both in the fresh and salt waters. We have 3 freshwater fish hatcheries. The biggest one is in Marion, and we have one at East Aboga. And Alabama has the largest number of aquatic species in the United States. So we are very blessed to be a wet state with a lot of species, and the hatcheries are instrumental in providing fish for those state public lakes, and then other projects as we go along. And one of the biggest, most important things that we do at those hatcheries is the Alabama Aquatic Biodiversity Center. That's also in Marion, where we raise the endangered mussels and snails to mitigate a lot of loss of those species from dams and lakes and different environmental factors. Having this to recover some of those species is really helpful, not only for the species, but for industry in our state to be able to do things in creeks that, or rivers or streams that might have been off limits to some development in the past because of the endangered species. And then we have a mariculture center, about 23,000 square foot hatchery and facility in Gulf Shores right behind the airport. So most people that go down to the Gulf, they don't realize we're kind of tucked away back there with 35 ponds. We have 2 saltwater pipelines, really the only place on the Gulf, one of the few places in the country that have 2 pipelines, one for brackish water and one for salt water. So we're able to do a lot of work there at that facility, and we partner particularly with the University of South Alabama and Auburn University on aquaculture research and other activities at the Mariculture Center in Gulf Shores. And then in Alabama, we have the largest artificial reef program in the country. Really, we have the largest artificial reef program in the world. I was at we rival Japan. Is really our biggest competition on that. I mean, so I was at a fisheries meeting, and the Minister of Fisheries from Japan was there, and we had a discussion about who had the bigger artificial reef program, and he didn't speak very much English, and I spoke absolutely no Japanese. So I'll say I won the argument in the end, because after we got finished, and that we have the biggest in the world. But I will say, anytime that you're comparing a program in the state the size of Alabama with a country with a GDP of Japan on a program like this, and as important as fisheries is, as you know, to their culture, just shows the vast, how important the artificial reef program is that we have in Alabama, and what that means for our coastal area. And then we manage the Forever Wild program. The senator asked me, I'll spend just a couple of minutes here talking about Forever Wild, how that program works, and just giving you some information. So the program has acquired a little more than 285,000 acres in 31 different counties. 99% of those properties are open to the public. Some of them have portions of them that have a very sensitive ecological species, or some endangered species or area, or that we not really, that part's not really open to the public. And how we do that, we route trails and things around those so that people don't access those areas. And but it's an extremely valuable program for our state. It was first set up as a constitutional amendment in 1992 and then reapproved in 2012 as a constitutional amendment for another 20 years. So it'll be back on the ballot again in 2032 for approval. But I just want to, this is a kind of an overview of the program, and then I'll give you, after this, a little bit of an overview of the process of how purchases take place and how the program is managed. So there, in order for the board to purchase a piece of property, it has to score in one of these 4 categories: nature preserve, recreation area, state parks, or public hunting opportunities. The board's made up of 15 members. The members are appointed, some from the higher education, appoints some, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker. We have appointments to the board. I am, as the Commissioner of Conservation, serve as the chairman of the Forever Wild Board by statute, and we administer the program both for the acquisition and then managing the tracts after they're purchased. The process. I get asked about this a lot from different legislators and from the public, about the program. I want to say up front, it is not a quick process. It is a very transparent process, and it is a lengthy process for us to acquire a piece of property. If there's a landowner that is interested in their property being acquired by Forever Wild, it takes some amount of patience because the program is set up to be transparent and to make sure that it operates in a way that it's above reproach in how acquisitions are made and how the program is operated. So just give you a quick down and dirty of how it goes. The public nominates a tract, somebody, the landowner, an agent, somebody will nominate the tract for Forever Wild. It's a grassroots program. We're not, the board's not out soliciting properties. It is what has been nominated to the board. Then a willing seller letter is sent to the landowner by our department to make sure that that they're actually willing to participate, want their property to be considered. Once we receive that back, the tract is scored. And so, like I said, it has to score in one of these 4 categories to make what's called the short list. So if somebody nominates a piece of property and it doesn't have some benefit to the people of the state of Alabama to be held in the land trust for perpetuity, then it does not score very high or doesn't score at all, and cannot be considered by the board. So it has to be a property of a certain caliber before the board can consider it. If it makes the short list in one of those categories, then the board can consider the property. The board can move for a first appraisal at a meeting. So then that property will be appraised, and it will be back on the list for the board to consider for a second appraisal. And the board can never pay more than appraised value for a piece of property. So we have an appraisal. If the board decides they want to move forward on that property at a second or subsequent meeting, then they move for a second appraisal. And as long as those 2 appraisals meet within 10% of each other, then we move to make that acquisition. We work with the landowner to make the acquisition, and then that goes. We do all the due diligence, the environmental surveys, the site assessment, title commitment, and all those things that you would normally do with a acquisition, and then that we close that tract, and it is titled to the Alabama Trust Fund, and then we as a department manage that tract. The statute was set up through the constitutional amendment that 15% of the appraised value goes into a stewardship fund for perpetual care for those properties. So even if you have $1 million piece of property, $150,000 goes into that stewardship fund. And we also, from time to time, receive donations of property either from a land trust or the Nature Conservancy or others. Even if the property is donated into Forever Wild, we take the appraised value and put money in that stewardship fund for that property moving forward. I say it's an extremely popular program. About 80% of the people voted for it both in 1992 and in 2012. We have more than 350 miles of trails on those on their tracks, added to 10 different state parks. And I mentioned that about the 15% of the appraised value going into the stewardship fund, because I just think that's an important piece to discuss, because that is money that is used to be able to manage those tracks, to provide public access, and will be there for a long time to be able to make sure that those properties stay managed. We have 2 canoe trails in Mobile and Baldwin counties, in Perdita River and Bartram, and then we soon to expand that into other areas. We have a lot of property along the Cahaba River, and we have a lot of opportunity to really be able to grow our canoe trails and kayak trails around the state. And if that's not enough, I'll just talk of a couple of hit a couple of the other additional DCNR duties that we handle. We handle the Seafood Marketing Commission for Alabama. That was set up after the BP oil spill. We do all the offshore oil and gas leasing. We coordinate with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and we handle all of that for the state. We do pipeline right-of-ways, permits to cross. I'm the designee to the Wind and Renewable Energies Task Force that was set up around the country, as that is something that as that moves forward, trying to protect the state's interest and the people's interest in Alabama on that task force. We do state water bottom easements. I talked about the seafood seasons and management. And one of the things that I think is important as we talk about the Education Trust Fund and the General Fund is that we partner with our state universities on a lot of research and cooperative wildlife grants. Some of that money comes through the Fish and Wildlife Service to us, and then we work with the universities on projects that are either important to wildlife or help with our management priorities. And that includes Auburn, USA, Alabama, Jacksonville State, UAB, West Alabama, Alabama A&M, Dolphin Island Sea Lab, and we even do some stuff with the University of Georgia, because they got a really good program over there with turkeys, and they have a great testing lab that we work with them. And then there's just some of the Trails Commission and other organizations that we are represented on. We handle the GOMESA program management, which is some oil and gas revenues that come, and y'all passed a bill last year where those monies can only be spent in Mobile and Baldwin counties. That's the only place those monies have ever been spent, but that is, we manage that for the governor, that program. And then the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. I got a couple of slides on this. Spend just a couple of minutes, if it's okay with you, Senator, on this part, because when you're talking about budgets, it is a large part of the budget of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Most of this is pass-through money that goes to either Mobile County, Baldwin County, or the cities in Mobile and Baldwin counties for projects that are approved. And the Department of Conservation is the fiduciary agent for the Alabama Restoration Council. So this is, just a table. It's complicated. I could stand up here for an hour to talk about the oil spill money and the funding and how it all works. I know y'all don't want to hear all that, but I am available for questions. Be glad to come talk to anybody about it. However, I just want to point out that there are different funding sources from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. For most of those, in the settlement with BP, Alabama received an allocation of funds that will be paid out through 2032. So you didn't get all the money at once. It's paid out annually through 2031 is the last year. Of those amounts, it adds up to about $1.5 billion of oil spill money for Alabama. That is managed through the department, and we have a Deepwater Horizon oil spill section that we set up, a very small section, but they handle all of the administrative work that we do on that. The only one that is not allocated, if you see that Restore Council Bucket 2, Council Selected Restoration component, that second line down, that's $1.6 billion that was allocated to that group. That's made up of the 5 states and 6 federal agencies. I'm the governor's designee on that group, and we arm wrestle over how we're going to divide up that $1.6 billion, and it has been very collegial, and we've been able to work that out very well so far. But that is the only one that is not allocated directly by state. That is a competitive that we work with the other states and those 6 federal agencies. And then, so to date, we have approved over 160 projects that we're managing $936 million worth of work. That's pretty impactful for an area like Mobile and Baldwin counties to have that much money for projects that are either completed, underway, or approved that are working through the engineering and design, hadn't gone to construction yet. But those are the different categories of that project. So it's almost $1 billion that we are managing down on the coast. And then this is my last slide. I won't bore you too long, I hope. But I do want to talk about some things moving forward, things that in the department that are extremely important for us and for the state. Outdoor recreation, as I mentioned in that first slide, is a huge economic driver for our state. We're blessed in Alabama with trees, water, and biodiversity. We've got a lot of stuff here that they don't have in other states. The Innovation Commission validated the need for outdoor recreation when they gave the report to you all, how important that was, not only for the quality of life here, but for our ability to retain a workforce and to use that as a tool to attract workers to our state. The Innovation Commission has gone into the Innovation Corporation, and at their meeting last month, they created the Outdoor Recreation Council as part of their work to focus on the outdoor recreation aspect of their work moving forward. And DCNR is leading that group on the council. I appreciate the opportunity to serve in that role. So for us, because for us in the department, we have an outdoor recreation plan. We see the importance of this and what it can mean to all of your communities. So some of the things that are in our plan moving forward that we're looking to fund or to build or to do over the next few years is to improve boating access with tournament-sized boat ramps. We see what that means to communities that are hosting these big tournaments, and we have certain places of our state that need that. We recently finished a project in Demopolis, working with Marengo County and the city of Demopolis to build a tournament boat ramp over there, and that's in West Alabama because we didn't have anything like that over there, and we want to replicate that in a lot of other places. We want to create the Alabama Shooting Sports Trail. I told you we had 12 shooting ranges, but we have the opportunity, I think, to really make Alabama a destination for shooting sports, high school teams, for other groups to come here. Very similar to like the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail. You can use that as an example and how we can do that with shooting sports. And then trail building and trailhead amenity improvement. That includes blueways, hiking, biking, horseback riding, and regional and statewide trail systems. We see we have a lot of great trails in Alabama. We're seeing people that want to come from all over the country as a destination for places, in particular like mountain bikers. Northwest Arkansas has a great program where they've got a lot of designations for some of their trails or systems there. And they're seeing people come to Northwest Arkansas from all over to ride bikes and stay there 4 or 5 days and spend money. And we have the ability to do the same thing in Alabama with Coldwater Mountain in the Anniston area, Oak Mountain State Park, Montesano, Chihuahua State Park, some other places that we have great trails. We just need a little bit of enhancement on those to get them to a standard where we'll be able to make Alabama a destination for that. The Pinhoti Trail, we really want to make a lot of improvements there and get that up to the standard of a National Recreation Trail designation. Again, make Alabama a destination for people using that trail system. And we need to upgrade and retrofit a lot of outdoor infrastructure that we have. And one thing that we don't have in the state is an inventory or one-stop shop for all of this outdoor recreation things that we have around the state. If you want to know what trails you have, you've got to go to this website or that website or this group. We want to be able to bring all that together in one inventory and have that as a tool that we can use not only for our citizens, but also for recruiting and using that to attract talent here, to show them what all we do have in Alabama. And then, we really need somebody to help coordinate all of that throughout the state. So, went through a whole lot of information. Hopefully, Senator, I covered the things that you were of interest, but as most times happen when I speak somewhere, what I talk about is nothing anybody wanted to hear. They have questions of their own, and so I am glad to be here, be glad to answer any questions that you have. If I can't answer it, I've got some good folks behind me that hopefully can help me.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I appreciate that. I've got two questions that's come up since our conversation. I don't mean to blindside, but does DCNR have jurisdiction or responsibility for water channels, the marking of channeling or dredging or anything of that nature?
The marking of channels belongs with ALEA, with the Marine Patrol. That used to be in the Department of Conservation with ALEA, when it was the Alabama Marine Police, but when the consolidation took place, they moved over to ALEA.
All right, thank you for that.
Yes.
Second, but they don't do dredging, do they?
No, sir.
I didn't think so. Okay, that's probably with the Corps, isn't it? Yeah. Second thing, if you can speak to a matter that's come to my attention on this, and that is the potential removal, destruction, demolition of the dams on the Alabama River at Miller's Ferry and Claiborne. Do you know anything about that matter?
Well, I know that there was some money appropriated by Congress to do a feasibility study to look at those dam removals or fish passage on those particular dams, and that is a project that's being led by the Corps, working with our department is a part of that, and the Nature Conservancy is very interested in that as well. So that is as you know, anytime that you're talking about removing a dam or doing anything like that, it will be a very long feasibility study process and then permitting process, and it just got started. That money was just appropriated by Congress this last year.
We probably could have done without that appropriation, but I would suggest that the potential of that would be detrimental to West Alabama. But that's just I just wanted to know if the rumors I'd heard were accurate. Thank you for that. Any other questions for the commissioner?
Representative Reynolds.
Representative Reynolds, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. I bragged on you up in North Alabama when many of us joined you recently for an outdoor event in Marshall County, and certainly want to do it today publicly. We appreciate what you and your department do for our state parks. It's amazing how our usage has increased in North Alabama, so we appreciate the support. So one quick question related to the bond projects. Where will we find the latest update line items on where that funding will be spent per state park?
Sure, I can get that to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
Following up on that question about bonds in the state park, the $80 million bond issue, was it approved in June in the primary votes that we had?
It was approved in May, yes, sir.
Can you help me understand why that bond issue at that point in time didn't go to the market in a much more friendly and acceptable rate type situation than we are now? And maybe that you all had no control over that. It may have gone through a different portion of government, but trying to understand why we're so late getting that bond issue out, and we're in a much higher rate situation than we would have been back in June or July or whatever from that.
Sure. We're working with the Finance Director's Office on the process to do the bonds. After it was passed, through the state system, they would require a bond council, had to RFP that. We have that in place now, and we are working with them diligently to be able to shorten that timeline as much as possible to be able to sell those while it is before any other interest rates go up, as Kurt was talking about. So the Finance Director is very aware of that, and he is working, and his team very diligently for us to get this done.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir, Senator Beasley.
Hey, Commissioner, appreciate the job you're doing. You're doing a tremendous job. I
Thank you, sir.
appreciate it. On the off-trail vehicle site that was put down at Lake Point, is that going to be done in other parks around the state, or is this the only one?
So he's asking about the off-highway vehicle trail system. We took the old repurposed golf course at Lake Point State Park and built a off-highway vehicle trail system there. And we also built one at Bucks Pocket State Park. We are evaluating those and seeing the usage and how that works before we move forward with any other parks, but that is something we're evaluating. And if that's a moneymaker for us, or it really provides a great service to a group of people that we have not been able to target before, we'll look to expand that somewhere else.
Is it being received well by the public?
Not as well as I would like. And I think we need to do a little bit better marketing on that to, we did the soft opening, and now we're at a point where maybe we can market that a little bit better, that people outside of just the Lake Point area know that it's available.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Commissioner, just one quick question. How big of a problem is the feral pig issue with you and your budget? And is there any solution on the horizon for that?
That's a very long, I can give you a really long answer or a short answer. It is a very big problem, not only for us in the department on some of our wildlife management areas, but for landowners in general. We've worked with, there's a hog council, feral hog council. We're a part of that, along with the Wildlife Federation, Department of Agriculture, NRCS, different groups that are all trying to do something about that. Y'all passed some legislation a couple of years ago that transferred some sovereign immunity to the soil and water conservation districts so that they could purchase corral traps and have them in each of the counties that they can loan out to landowners. That was a very a big step, because the corral traps and doing that on a consistent basis is the best way to address the feral hog problem on somebody's piece of property. It has to be an ongoing thing. But there is a sodium nitrite that has been developed that is a toxicant for those. That's hung up right now at EPA in Washington as far as getting that approved. Once that is approved, that will be a very good tool to move forward on trying to mitigate wild hogs. And a lot of work's been done on delivery systems where, with Auburn University and others, where the troughs only open if it's a certain amount of pressure. So a raccoon or a bird or something couldn't open the trough, but a hog could, and some sound. If the hog sound, it will open so that they can eat, but it won't do it for other animals. So a lot of work's been done to get that in place, so that hopefully when EPA finally gets around to approving that, that'll be a great tool.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir.
And it's been time well spent, very educational. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all.
Commissioner Butner, how are you?
Well, I'm here this morning. My vehicle that I normally drive got a recall on it, so I'm in a state motor pool car, and I have pulled over twice this morning to put the hatch down. There's something wrong with that vehicle, obviously, so it's kind of been a wild ride this morning, but I'm here.
Well, we're glad Aaliyah got you here on time.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know I've worked with many of you for a long time. You know a lot about DHR. Some of you may not know a lot about DHR. So I have some questions that I was given to specifically address this morning, and that's kind of what I'm going to do. But before we get started, DHR is a pretty large agency. I call it one of the motherships of the HHS agencies. That's Health and Human Services. We're there, been around a long time with public health, mental health, and DHR in the state as far as HHS agencies. Back probably in '07, we had around 4,500 employees, and we're going to get into employees later on when I talk. We are now a little over 3,700 employees. I don't need 4,500 employees. I told a finance director years ago in '08 when things hit that I could take it down 200, 250, and we'd be okay. But I really do need between 4,100 and 4,200 employees. So we're never bored over there, I assure you of that, as many of you know, because you get a lot of calls about DHR. And I just want to remind you, we run 6 major programs. That's food assistance, TANF, child support, child care, adult protective services, and child welfare. When you think about the 2 things that people are most passionate about, is their children and their money. I sometimes wonder which order that comes in, but I know those two are at the top. And DHR gets in the middle of all of that because of the child support program. People see us as taking money. Because of the child welfare program, they see us as taking children, even though it takes a judicial order on both of those for us to get the money, keep the child too. So it's, I've told 3 governors now they will get more complaints on DHR than any other agency, and it's because of the nature of what we do. You all, some of you get a lot of calls too, probably. And when you think about those issues, if you've ever had the opportunity to go into child support court, you will see, or child welfare court, it's not usually just 2 people up there. It's 2 people, and then you've got a whole family up there or waiting in the hallway. And everybody has an opinion, and they've got phone numbers, and they're going to call. So hopefully, in the grand scheme of things, when we get the situation worked out, we will have done the right thing between us and the judge and the attorneys involved. So that's our goal. But it's a mighty responsibility when you're taking care of other people's children. And it has become more difficult over the years due to some things that we're going to talk about. First of all, on page 2, I think you all have a packet that was passed out. These are my slides. This is just our funding sources. This is 21 data, but they're pretty similar on 22. You'll see that big orange piece there. Those are federal dollars. We get a lot more federal dollars than we do state dollars. But I will tell you, a state dollar is more precious to me than a federal dollar because most of those federal dollars we can't get to without that bit of state funding that we need to draw them down. So they are very important. The next page is the expenditures by functional area.
Ms.
And
Buckner,
yes,
just before you go to the next one, on those earmarked state funds there, could you give the committee like some examples of what that is?
the earmarked state funds,
I don't know, like beer tax?
yeah. Yeah, I thank Matt Gibson all the time for that work that he
Right.
does, and he reminds me how much he gives me through the beer tax. And then there's some, you probably know it better than I do, some other earmarks that many years ago that mental health and us get through is it Confederate Widows Fund or something like that, I believe,
Right.
in there. So, but like I say, if we didn't have that, we could not access all the federal dollars that we are able to access to run these programs.
Right,
All
but
six
basically
of
those
those.
are like, those earmarked state funds are like things that would normally go to the general fund. So
Yes.
for all practical purposes, the state general fund portion and the earmarked state funds really goes up to about 10%.
Yes, it
Right.
does.
Okay.
On the next page on the expenditures, I think you, Representative, mentioned the COVID funding, and Kurt was talking about earlier that a lot of it went to agencies. You'll see in 21, we spent $949 million that was COVID money coming in. Most of the COVID money coming in from the feds, though, has specific, very specific areas that you cannot get outside of as far as spending that. One of the largest areas was in the area of childcare, and two or 300 million said that it had to go directly to providers. Then we could decide different ways it could go to providers, but like I say, it was not open free money that you can just spend however you want to help your agency. Most of it had to be spent on non-recurring things, so it couldn't be used to help fill your budget needs or anything like that. So most of it, we had to get in and get out. We were time limited. We had to obligate it. We've still got some more that I think we've got till the end of this month to obligate it, and then we have to have it out by a certain date too. So anyway, that's our expenditures. You'll see the food assistance program is the largest program. That's the red. Food assistance benefits are 100% federally funded. It's the administration that we have to pay. It's about a 50-50 match, not quite. On the next page, I was...
Commissioner Buckner, again, that the food assistance, you're talking about food stamps,
Yes.
right? And that's all federal funding.
The benefits are
Right.
100% federally funded, the SNAP. The retailers, the grocers will tell you that that's probably what kept them afloat during the COVID pandemic.
Right. I just wanted to
Because-
make that point there I know we've got some pretty good economic figures right now, but in times past when we were always struggling, I would hear from constituents, if y'all just get rid of those food stamps, you'd have plenty of money in state government. And then I had to tell them that it was all federal money on the food stamps.
It is 100% federal money, and if Alabama doesn't want it, New York and California will be happy to take it. So that's just the way I feel about it, because the feds are gonna, and they've told us on the COVID money, if we don't spend it or whatever, it will be distributed to other states. So I've told them they just need to send me the other states' money, so we'll spend it. So, but as I said, the Retail Grocers Association was very happy to get that money. Also, EBT can be used in farmers markets now too. That's been the case for several years now, helping to feed people. In regard to inflation, which is page 4, we haven't started to see a lot in regard to inflation. Now, we're hearing a lot about it, but we computed some numbers just with the travel expense going up. We're anticipating about another $500,000 in cost for travel. Our postage from 21 to 22 went up $495,000. So that's probably going to go up a little more next year. We're seeing some utility costs going up now. I've been reading in the newspaper various utility boards talking about raising costs and all too. So we are anticipating at least a $1 million increase in our utility cost. Now that last bullet is our providers that care for these children that are in custody. And they're telling us that they can't make it, and I doubt they can. So we are anticipating those costs to go up. One reason we think this past year our costs have not gone up is, remember, we have contracts on all these things with the providers and all that, so they couldn't go ahead and raise the rates on us right now. I was also asked to talk about hires and separation.
Ms. Buckner, if I might
Sure.
back up on this previous slide there, the increased cost, you're talking about foster care there, is that accurate?
Yes, well, foster care and everything else. We not just kids in foster care, but we have counselors that go in the homes that the child may not be in foster care, trying to keep them from going in foster care. Those providers are struggling. They're struggling for dollars, and they're all struggling for staff too, just like we are.
One other question on that. You mentioned about inflation not being seen, but the food prices are going up.
Yes, I'm not saying we're not seeing it. I think we're going to see it a lot more next year. We're not seeing the bulk of it now because we've got a lot of contracts in place that had fixed costs in them.
My concern is the federal money for food stamps and other food services along that line. Is that increasing commensurate with the inflation, or is that staying the same?
Well, what the feds are telling us is that a lot of that, unless it changes, because you know it can change on a week's notice, is that the increase that they put out there in benefits due to the pandemic should go away at the end of this year, unless they put more extensions out there on it, which is what they have done maybe for the past year. And I know you have all read about what's called PEBT, that's Pandemic Electronic Benefit Transfer. That was for, you know, most schools in Alabama do free lunches just because of community-based eligibility. And then when they go virtual or whatever, there was concern on the federal part about are the kids being fed. And so the feds decided to do PEBT, which was to put a certain amount on an EBT card to cover those free lunches. We just finished another round of it recently, and that's for 400 to 500,000 children that we did that for. And it's questioned whether or not the feds are going to do that anymore. We don't really know. We have not been told that they were, but they've added things that they didn't tell us till a couple of weeks' notice anyway, so.
So we have a means where the costs are increasing, but the services or the benefits that are being provided may be declining.
From where they are right now, especially like SNAP, because one of the things that the feds did, which had a great effect on our elderly, they allowed to go up to the excess amount. Many elderly people in this state don't get like the full allotment for a one-person household, which I don't remember what that is right now. It might be $160 a month because SNAP is food stamps.
Right.
It's supplemental, and you can only buy food items, but it doesn't cover everything. So they allowed us to go up. Like, we had a lot of elderly people that may have only been receiving $25 a month, which 10 years ago, most of them wouldn't even apply. But when their medication went up and their insurance went up, $25 meant something to them. So they became eligible. Well, now, during this pandemic area we've been in, the feds have allowed us to not only give them the 25, but to give them the difference in 25 and whatever that maximum rate was, which added a lot more food assistance benefits, which I think is going to be really, really hard for some people when the Fed's in that. Because, you know, March of 20, April of 20 is when it started. So they've been getting that increase during that time. And it's not going to be a soft landing unless they've been saving some. You can have benefits can stay on your card up to 12 months from the date they were put on there. So,
But if that pandemic increase changes, that's scheduled to change the end of this calendar.
end of this calendar year right now.
All right.
Like I said, they could come out and add something else. I don't know at this point.
Thank you.
On page 5, we're talking about staff and hiring. There's a bar graph there, and I went back to 2017, and you can see the green is our total hires for that year. We already had people on board. That's how many people we hired. And you'll see we were pretty even. We hired 661, we lost 654. Then you look at 21. We hired 578, and we lost 836. That was kind of the pandemic had been going for a while. 22, it's not that bad yet, but we don't know what we're going to close with in 22. There's a disproportionate amount, and that's how you keep doing that and you get on down. Now on the next page, look at child welfare. Child welfare is probably I know it is, it's our most difficult program to manage anyway, just because of the nature of the job. Adult protective services can be too, we just don't have the same kind of volume there as we do in child welfare. But if you look in 2017, the total hires, the total child welfare hires was 416, and then the separations was 343. If you go over to 21, you will see the total hires was 335, and the separations was 466. I know several of you are lawyers, and if you look at the Code of Alabama, some of you have passed laws through the years. Child welfare is woven all through the code, so we have a lot of mandates. And a lot of those mandates were passed down from the federal people to the state people. So it's an enormous responsibility, and it's an enormous liability when you've got staff levels like this. If you look on page 7, this is the turnover rate in child welfare versus the rest of DHR. The green is child welfare, the blue is DHR. Look at the blue first. Our turnover rate is 20.87% in 21. In 17, it was 15.7%. But if you look at child welfare in 21, our turnover rate is 46% in child welfare for 21. I didn't put it on this graph because I fully expect to see this again because I'm in a federal court case. But our turnover rate as of July the 31st of this year in child welfare is 54%. And it's tough. It's tough on those workers. It's tough on those managers. And that's why the lawsuits are going to go up, and they have been. Now, if you look on the next page, it's challenges to hiring and retention.
Commissioner Buckner, if Representative Reynolds has a question.
Commissioner,
I'm sorry.
I apologize, just real
Go ahead.
quick, and I don't need real numbers, just, I guess your perception, like, so what, almost 1,650 people left your department in 2 years. Is there a high number of those retirements? Are they leaving for higher paying jobs, or are they just leaving the workforce?
A lot of them are just leaving the workforce. There's a number of retirements. Several years ago, and y'all will remember it better than I can, when the drop program went away, that would have kept a few more people, not a significant number, but every little bit does count. And I understand you had to do it or whatever. But I lost a lot of institutional knowledge in those days. And then since then, and we'll talk about it, the reasons we're losing people to in child welfare, we're about to talk about, because it is a very, very difficult job. Sure. And, most of them are females. Many of them are young. Many of them are like I was. I graduated from college and I planned to save the world. I was going to help all these people out there. And so some of them are kind of idealistic. They don't understand. Some of them's family members. I get emails regularly. I'm not going to tell you I get a great number, but I get them regularly from husbands, fathers, mothers, about the job. And, the job is the job. And we do everything that we can to try to offset safety issues within the job, but it's still hard.
Sure.
And when you've graduated from school and you've never seen a baby die, it's traumatic.
Absolutely.
And they go to the hospital, hold the baby, rock the baby, or whatever, even though we know that the prognosis is extremely bad. But they're subjected to a lot in the real world. When you look at the newspaper articles, you don't see much about DHR, because we're bound by confidentiality every way we turn. You'll read articles where the sheriff might say DHR took custody of the child, and I certainly appreciate it every time law enforcement puts us in there. But we're always in those cases. And the work hours aren't great. Some of them have to get up in the middle of the night and leave their children or get their mom or somebody to come keep their children so they can go out on somebody else's child. Aaliyah works a terrible accident on one of our interstates. Families kill children are in the car. What do they do with them? They call DHR. These raids that you've been seeing about the migrant children working in factories. We picked up 6 the other night. They called us. They raided a place. We go get them. We have to find a place for them. It takes a while to find a place. Sometimes we sit at night with them in our office, or we go to a hotel with them, because it's hard to place 6 children at one time on 30 minutes notice too. So they stay really, really busy all the while trying to follow all these policies and laws they're supposed to, and then they may end up in a lawsuit anyway. So appreciate your question. Page 8, challenges. Often we can't compete with the wages. Had one we were going to hire, and Sherwin-Williams hired her out from under me. They were going to pay her more to test their paint than we could pay her as a social worker. Had another one I lost. She was going to work 2 jobs, and I didn't know this. The state system, you can't work from 2 state agencies. She worked for a hospital, and she was going to do that on weekends and work for us. And I was fine with it. We need workers. And so I lost her because of that. Lost one to be a hostess at a pretty upscale restaurant because they could pay her more, and she would have set hours working with them. So part of it's wages. Part of it.
Commissioner Buckner, what about your mental health professionals? I mean, you have a number of those in DHR, don't you?
We have some where it looks like we're probably going to have a lot more when that federal judge finishes with me, but
Right.
Yeah.
So does that cause you problems now that we have to have we passed legislation where mental health counselors are in our schools as far as competing against the?
You have a finite work pool here, and it's on down in one of
Okay,
ours.
go ahead.
Um,
Yep.
20 years ago, or when I first started out, I don't even know that public health had social workers, but public health was the next agency that started hiring social workers. When I started out, hospitals didn't have social workers. They had some people that did social work, but they weren't social workers. So you've got hospitals hiring, you've got mental health hiring, you got schools hiring now. I mean, if you could leave work every day at 3:30, be off 2 to 3 months in the summer, not have to go out at night, and you are working in an office-controlled environment, you gotta really love it to want to come to work for DHR. There's a huge difference there. But the numbers required, I mentioned going out at night. DHR is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every county in this state has got somebody on call. So, like I say, they rotate it. So there's a week or two in there where you're on call. If DHR gets a call, you get up, you get dressed. If it's 2 a.m. in the morning, you go out. There's a supervisor on backup to talk to you. That one's not usually going out. There's some counties we have to have 2 people on call because we ended up, as a result of several things over the years, we're the go-to agency too. When nobody else comes out, if there's children, DHR is going to come out because we have to. We are mandated in the code and we have to go out. Just like picking up children. We have to pick up children. We have to go get them right then when the judge gives us custody of a child. Everybody doesn't have to do that, but DHR does. No matter what time of day, night, what condition the child's in, we have to go pick them up. And we're asking these staff to go pick them up, whatever condition it's in. So the nature of the job is different too, because they have to go out, they have to enter homes. Sometimes they have to put children in their car. They're worried about their children. Then there are other entities competing for staff, which we've talked about that. And I've said in here, there's more pay sometimes and more predictable work environments. Number 4 is they encounter dangerous things and traumatic situations. These are all true stories. This past year, I think it was this past year, I had a worker that was stabbed in the office. It's not uncommon if you get bit by dogs. If you're going out to people's houses, sometimes you don't see that dog that's on a chain that's under the house until you get on the porch. And that dog is a lot of times a pit bull. And we have workers that get bit. Not too long ago, I had a worker that got bit by a 15-year-old young man. She had to go to the ER. She had so many bites and bruises on her. Have one that got slapped to the ground. Then you probably read about the supervisor that not just hit by a car by accident, but the guy backed up, was going to run over her. She suffered a lot of injuries. Some she'll carry with her for the rest of her life. But that's doing social work. Not to mention, had a guy call me the other day, wanted to tell me I didn't need to send his daughter out in the field because she just had a gun pulled on her at one of the houses she had gone into. Now, I am thankful for law enforcement. They will generally go with us at night. During the day, there's not enough law enforcement to go out with us on everything that we go out on. So if we know it's drugs out there ahead of time, we will generally ask law enforcement, and they are very, very good to go with us. But still, we have situations that you just don't know what might come up. So those are reasons that it's hard to retain staff. And then you get to number 5, which is social media. And if I could turn it off after I left this meeting, I would go do that, I promise you. When you have social workers that are trying to do their job, and all of this on social media, I see you smiling, Steve Klaus, I've said this to you before. And once they put it out there, it's confidential. We're not gonna respond to it because sometimes that keeps it going anyway. But then you get that, and then we have a couple of trial lawyers in the state whose new tactic is to put it out in the media, and a couple of people like to write about it, so they like to try their case in the media, and you got this little worker that might have been out all night long. She's got to be in court at 8:30 with her court report, even though she didn't get in till 5 o'clock this morning. That's a true story too. And she's having to read about all these other things and how horrible, DHR has done. It doesn't entice you to want to come to work for us. But if you really love a challenge and you love to be threatened and try to figure out things, then you ought to come to DHR. We should be your number one choice. But anyway, social media causes us a lot of problems in child welfare. And then number 6 is the lawsuits. And we've got them everywhere. And when I talk about the lawsuits, they're generally it's a jury trial. You can have a worker that possibly didn't give a foster parent one page of paper that our policy calls for her to give them, and that jury can just award whatever they want to award. And it's very traumatic for a person that may have never even know how the court really works. Now, they do on dependent side, but when you get facing that attorney that's questioning you to the hilt on why didn't you do this and how important this was, it's very hard to prep a worker to stand up to those kinds of things. So those are our challenges to hiring and to retention. And then you get to what we've done to recruit and retrain social workers. We have streamlined some of the policies. We allow them to send travel claims in twice a month. Most places it's once. We've given them tablets to take out in the field because everything that they're doing has got to be documented to the nth degree because of all the federal money coming in and because of the lawsuits too. We increased our on-call pay to $4 an hour. That's where, like, if you're on call for a week and you've got to be called out, nurses were paying $3 or something like that an hour, and I thought, well, this won't cost us that much. We'll try to do this as an incentive. And they did like it. They appreciated it a lot. Then a couple of years ago, we did a pay increase by adding some other levels in there, like a caseworker 1 and a caseworker 2. We did that. State personnel's been very good to try to help us figure out how to keep workers, get workers, and that kind of thing. Don't laugh at ice machines, but I found out about 5 years ago it's very important to most of the female workers, and it's a certain kind of ice they like. I can't tell you what kind it is, but that's the kind of ice machines we make sure every county has that. Boost morale. We have leased cars. We put some leased cars, I believe they're in every county in the state now, so that we don't have enough out there. I don't know that we could afford it so that they never have to use their own car. But like sometimes if you're picking up 5 kids, you might not have a car large enough to put 5 children in with car seats. Might even take 2 cars if you had to have car seats. But that has been a big boost in some counties, having leased cars that are available for them to use. The next slide is where our leased cars are.
Commissioner, before you go to that, I had a question from one of our members that are listening online.
Sure.
Do you have any retired APOS certified law enforcement working out of local offices that escort DHR workers to sketchy situations?
No, we usually use the sheriff or the police department there. Mm-hmm. And to tell you the truth, a lot of times they like it because they can see other things that might be going on too. As I said, the map just shows where we've got some cars. We don't have enough for everybody to always get a car, but it has helped boost morale some, having those leased cars available. I was asked to talk about training just a little bit. Page 11 is our training. We have online training and in-person training. And on our online training, you'll see, and that is a true, real number, 67,657 trainings were completed by staff. Now, certain staff may have done 5 of those trainings last year. We just have a lot of training that our lawyers recommend that be done to help us defend it, and then the feds require lots of different training and different programs. And you see that equates to 60,775 hours that were completed by staff. On the in-person trainings, we had 5,004 completed by staff last year, equates to over 7,000 hours of training out there. But to tell you the truth, with that kind of turnover rate, it is really hard to keep up with all the training, but we continue to take a good shot at it. I was also asked to talk about litigation, and I just wanted to put that significant litigation, that first bullet in there, and that's an approximation. But we were in court throughout the state last year on approximately 36,000 times. There are really 36,000 different cases pretty much between child support court, adult protective services court, and child welfare court. Every foster child should have a case come up at least 2 times a year. The year that they enter care, that's a 3rd case that comes up, and there's other things that come up in between there. Now, in regard to significant cases, we currently I have 43 pending around the state. The majority of those cases involve a plaintiff seeking monetary damages. I sometimes feel like our staff are sitting ducks, and they really are on a lot of these cases. The next page is about our federal class action lawsuit. And those 2 bullets are directly from the petition that was filed, the complaint that was filed in, and you will see, says, DHR also fails to ensure that children in DHR's custody have adequate access to an appropriate array of providers to deliver sufficient community-based mental health services. And as a result, DHR is putting these children in more restrictive placements. The next bullet says DHR fails to ensure that children in foster care have access to mobile crisis and crisis stabilization services. I'm the only agency named in that lawsuit. So, and they're still in the discovery phase. I think we're holding, I don't know, maybe 22,000 documents for them right now. So our last class action lawsuit in child welfare ended in 2007. That one went on for 19 years, and we are so hoping that this one doesn't. Because I'm going to tell you, it is really hard to deal with a class action lawsuit once it gets going and deal with a 54% turnover rate from those same people that are involved in all of this. So it's going to be quite a challenge for us. And we've got looks like a lot of more mental health services that we're going to have to develop for these children. Now, our greatest challenges on page 14, some of them I've talked about, is that 21 turnover rate in that's 46% in child welfare. Our lawsuits is a great challenge, trying to manage a lawsuit in midst of that kind of turnover rate with everybody calling and emailing and trying to keep children alive. The next challenge is the outdated computer systems of SNAP, TANF, and child care. Now, we are working on that SNAP, TANF one. The feds have finally gotten their approval. I've been trying to get a new SNAP system, not because y'all didn't give us a little extra money to do it. It's dealing between that and dealing with the feds. I've been working on it for about 10 years now, so hopefully it's going to come about. We're closer than we've ever been on that one. But social media is a great challenge. And that last one, it's not last because it's in that order, because it is a huge challenge for us, is placements and services for children and youth with mental health needs. So on the next page, locating appropriate services and placements is extremely difficult due to mental health issues, intellectual disabilities, and other things. And I'm talking about the 15-year-old that bit and beat up the worker falls into that category. The young man with the 40 IQ, the child that stabbed the worker in the office, falls into this category. Most of these kids are older youth. Like I said, DHR is the fallback. Part of my lawsuit is because of children being in psychiatric residential facilities. They think we've got too many. We're supposed to have them in the community with community-based services, which we're working on. And I think that's a great thing. But of that population, which is about 325 now, 65% of those kids are in DHR's custody because the parent relinquished them to DHR, or they abandoned them, or they brought them and said, we cannot take them anymore. Or they were adoptions. Some of them are international adoption disruptions that went wrong. We get them, and we have to take care of them.
Where do you house those?
Well,
Who cares for them?
we have to find somebody. And
So
in the
they're
meantime,
simply in foster care.
in the meantime, we get stabbed, we get bitten. I mean, that's what happened on both of those situations. It is extremely difficult to deal with it. When you look down on placement cost, you'll see that many placements cost more than $325 a day, which equates to $118,625 per child per year. But you look at that last one, that's our most expensive placement right now. We're paying $960 a day, which equates to $350,400 per year to take care of that youth right now. So not only is it's very, very difficult to find a place for them, it's very, very difficult to maintain them, and it is a high cost of money. And as I said, when a judge gives us custody, we have no choice but to go pick them up and get them. First stop is usually at our office. We've got lots of folks scrambling around looking for placements because they're very, very difficult to place because of their need level. And it's very difficult to find people to take them and then put the services in there because those providers are struggling too now for staff. And so it's quite challenging. But on the next page, I just want to share some of our accomplishments this past year that we are really proud of. If you look at child welfare, like I say, you don't read about us very much in the newspaper because everything's confidential. But in 21, we went out on over 36,000 reports involving almost 41,000 children. So that was knocking on the doors, whether there was a dog under the porch or not, and going to see what was going on and see what we could do. First and foremost, we don't want a child to have to enter foster care. We want to get that child safe, and many times it's with relatives. If you will look under that, 3,453 children entered care, 3,828 exited care, and that's a good thing. That's moving it in the right direction. We have actually lowered the number of children in foster care, and that's what we want to do. They may be coming into care, but we want to get them back home or to family at least. 783 children were adopted, and we currently have about 2,360 foster parents. But we always need more foster parents because we have different kinds of children, and some people can't take every child that we offer them. Most people can't, actually, especially those older youth. In adult protective services last year, we got over 11,000 reports. If you look at our TANF work participation rate, once they go on TANF, there's a great success that they will end up going to work. Last year, 55.8% did. Most of the folks on TANF now are not what you call the welfare client. They're grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, and uncles raising somebody else's children. So they don't have to comply with work requirements. They're helping keep that child out of foster care. On the next page, That's a number there from March 20. We have issued $5.5 billion in benefits in the SNAP program. It's a lot of money to run through a computer system that's more than 40 years old, so I'm real proud of that. But we do need a new one. We serve approximately 385,734 households, which equates to almost 330,000 children and almost 88,000 senior citizens. $791 million of that was PEBT. Child support last year collected $376 million, and child care serves almost 41,000 children. So far, we've distributed $339 million in stabilization funds for the child care program. And on the back is contact information. If you've got any questions ever, feel free to call us. You have my contact information, Stan Landers, Preston Hornsby, and then Dominic is our Director of Communications. So we,
Now we have one question from Representative Greer.
About how difficult it is to adopt and how expensive it is to adopt. And I've had examples, I know of a couple what I consider pretty perfect families that have really struggled to try to adopt a baby. They can't. Most of them end up going overseas and bringing one back. Of course, I wouldn't have a clue what the answer to that would be, but is there any way to simplify it, I'm wondering?
the adoption process itself is simple. I'm glad you mentioned it because I loved every opportunity to say that. When you're talking about foster parents, what takes a long time is the termination of parental rights, which they run hand in hand. You can't adopt a foster child until you TPR on them or terminate parental rights. Sometimes that can take a long time, but the adoption process itself, it doesn't take long. You just file it in probate court and keep going. That generally is done within less than 90 days.
Well, is it very expensive?
Well, what you're talking about expensive is when I don't control how much private adoption agencies charge. If you adopt a child from DHR, it's not very expensive at all. Depends on what an attorney wants to charge for it. And depending on the age of the child, you can get up to $1,000 stipend towards your adoption fee. All of the foster parent adoptions I know of nobody that has had to spend very much money at all to adopt. But now, some of the international adoptions are pretty costly. I think that, like I say, that's up to, we license those entities to be able to adopt, but they set their own fees and everything. And I've talked to other legislators through the years, and that's generally what they're talking about, is how much that costs to do a private adoption. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Go to Representative.
Commissioner, I want to thank you. Just sitting here listening to you, you know, you're dealing with all of the cracks on the wall when in fact the cracks are there because of the broken foundation of people's lives. And, you know, I just want to thank you and your staff and what you do and the impact that you're having on young people, infants. You know, you're virtually saving their lives. And I think back, do you have a statistic of like a fatherless homes in the state of Alabama? I've read where there's 40%, 4 out of every 10 homes wakes up tomorrow in this state without a father. And I see all the money that we're spending, you're asking for, you're trying to beg people to come work for you. And the whole reason is because it's the failure of the father and the family it starts with. And this is a spiritual issue. I mean, you see the worst of the worst. And if you could sum it up, I mean, we spend billions, 5.5 billions of dollars to fix what's broken because people aren't doing their job or honoring their responsibility as men, as fathers. What would you say? What would you say, you know, that fix the foundation? Well, you're fixing the cracks on the wall, the result of it, you know, and you're just trying to patch it and keep it covered. But, you know, the real issue, what would you say is the deepest foundational issue of this whole thing?
Well, I do think the lack of two-parent families can play into it. I do think that sometimes DHR does fix the foundation, not nearly enough, but if we can get in there early enough, it makes a difference. I do believe in fatherhood programs, and a lot of our judges that do child support programs will refer folks to fatherhood programs. Just to tell you a little story, I've been working DHR a long time, and I remember when the child support program first started, I was supervising it many years ago, and the judge called me up to the bench, and he said, you know, Nancy, this program is really this will have one of the most social impacts of any legislation that Congress had ever passed. I didn't pay much attention to it at that point, but it did, because back in those days, and I remember it because I used to travel the state and speak about it, I had the most children a father ever had that I worked with in Talladega County at the time. He had fathered 26 children. He couldn't afford them. It was not uncommon, though, for us to have cases with dads that had 12 children, 14 children. We have practically no cases like that in the whole state now. I'm not going to say we can't find one or two, but we don't. And I think part of that is a result of the child support program. Paying the money is one thing, but not only that, when you do that, you find a whole nother set of paternal relatives. You find those grandmothers and those grandfathers that were different when they were coming up. And it establishes relationships, and it helps that dad have a relationship, because we know there's nothing out there that's not going to tell you that a dad and a mama for a child is the most important thing that child can have. And so that's why I spend money on fatherhood programs. I do believe in them, because not only do they help men search out, get jobs so they can pay their child support, but they also encourage the visitation and the connections and all of that the two-parent family can bring to the table. So drugs are a huge issue in this state too, and that's something that I don't quite know the whole answer for that. But when you look at what brings kids into foster care and you peel back the layers, you will generally find drugs in there somewhere. And there's a lot of mental health issues out there too. A lot of the mental health issues are in combination with drug issues too in there. So, you know, if we could help solve some of those problems, we would go a long way and help bring people out of poverty. Transportation is a huge issue in this state. I have a lot of clients that I think I could get them to work, but trying to figure out how they're going to get to work is another deal in there. And so we're a rural county, and we don't have great transportation systems out there, and I think that would help move some other folks into the workforce, which would get them to doing other things too, and help them with their child care. We can do that. So I do think the lack of two-parent families is part of our problem, but I think there are some other issues out there too that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buckner. Thank you for being here and the information you provided.
Thank you. Just call us if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Oh, you'll get the calls. Barry? Good afternoon, sir, almost.
And I have to say this before she leaves. I've known Nancy my entire 30-year career as a prosecutor. She was in DHR in Talladega. We worked together, and you'll not find a person who has a bigger heart for children and the vulnerable in this state than Nancy Buckner. And I'm proud to work with her, and we're fortunate to have her in that role. I really
And
mean
Barry always answers my phone call because I call him at any time of the night.
that. You do.
Has he gone out with you? Never mind. Okay.
We have actually ridden the roads together before, looking for a crack house or a child death or something.
Yeah.
We have,
Good.
so.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thank you for what you do.
Welcome. I don't know that the DAs have been to proceeding or hearing such as this. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. This is a first for us, and something that we've wanted to be able to do, and to have this opportunity to have a primer about how we're funding and to cover those and answer the questions and be as transparent as we know we all should be.
Well, let me go for a clarification here.
Yes, sir.
We've just heard from two state agencies, those entities that are a part of the state executive branch. The district attorneys are not a state executive branch entity.
Well,
It is that they are a group on districts and the judicial branch. Is that accurate?
no, sir. Actually, the DAs are executive branch. 42 individual DAs, 42 individual state agencies. OPS is a small state agency that handles payroll, retirement, and those type things, and aids in the payroll process for the DAs. But they are, 42 separate constitutionally elected state officers and are 42 separate state agencies, basically. You fund them in one lump sum. That was a change, and I can cover that in a minute. The DAs divide that by a formula that we've presented back to the
So
legislature.
I just wanted to make sure that that the body was clear about
Yes.
there's a difference there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, sir. And I want to
Oh,
thank
wait
you.
a minute. Do we have a question? Did you? No? Okay. All right. All right. Go ahead.
I do want to thank you, Senator Albritton and Representative Klaus and other members of the committee, those that are here and are watching online. I do think it's important to acknowledge the leadership of this legislative fiscal committees for your leadership in getting us to a place. We heard the report from Kirk Fulford earlier, and I want to thank Kirk and Pete Grogan and Anthony and the folks in this building that help us daily with our budget needs and budget questions. But you've been successful in the way you've managed this issue, and we know we're in a good place financially as a state. It feels really good because I was a prosecutor years ago. We went through proration in the 90s, and I've seen it, and it's terrible. And the fact that I haven't seen that in many, many years is a testament to your hard work. I do want to acknowledge that there are some DAs here in the room. Randall Houston is DA just up the road. His CJ Robinson will be will be elected and will be the DA in January.
In fact, DAs, if you're present, stand up. All right. So as he introduces. All right.
We have Bob
Go ahead.
Wilters, Jeremy Doerr, Darrell Bailey, Rick Chansey, and Ken Davis, and then also Joe Borg and Amanda Sand with Securities Commission. They work with us and our members. Joe is a member of our association, the DA Association, so we work closely with them as well. So I want
I
to,
noticed all of them over here except mine.
yeah. I want to cover a few things with you and go through this. And you had some specific questions for us that are relative to our budget issues, but I really think this is an opportunity for us to kind of explain how we're funded, because certainly I'm in line like everybody else. I come see you and we need funding. We need more funding, and everybody says they need more funding. But I really truly believe, and I hope when we conclude this brief presentation, that you'll have an understanding of the unique and really upside down, nature of our funding. It is really unlike anybody else, and it's not your fault or our fault. It was because of decisions that were made in the 80s and early 90s about how DAs would be funded, and there's a legacy from that we have got to dig out of, and I think you'll see in a few moments why. Just by the numbers, there are 42 elected district attorneys. Right now, there are 41 supernumerary DAs. We have some DAs that will become supernumerary, but that is a process that is ended. So currently the DAs that will take office in January and DAs that have taken office the last couple of years are in a new retirement system that was created. So the supernumerary system will eventually end, but we expect to have as many as 50 next year, but that number will peak out and then begin to decline. Full-time assistant DAs in Alabama, remarkably, we only have 278. When you see the caseload numbers in a minute, I think that will be shocking as we tie those together. Part-time assistant DAs, those will be people that do child support contracts, that do maybe part-time trial work, but most of those people are contract for child support, things like that. Total employees in Alabama for DAs is 952. These are the circuits in Alabama. You'll see some circuits, there are 41 circuits, some are multi-counties. The First Circuit is Choctaw, Clark, and Washington. It has 3 counties, and you go down to the Third Circuit, it's Barber and Bullock, but the Sixth Circuit is Tuscaloosa. So you see, what we have in Alabama is really unique because you have 42 DAs, you've got 41 circuits. The reason you have 42 DAs is in Jefferson County, there's a Bessemer division that has a DA. So there's 42 DAs, but 41 circuits. And it's really incredible because the challenges are so different. We are really a diverse group. Our members are by gender, race, the communities that they represent are very diverse. But their challenges are, what the drugs and the crime in one area of the state is not necessarily what it is in another area of the state. And then the resources to fund our offices in some areas is certainly not in some areas what it is in other areas. So we really, although I always say the DAs are so diverse in their number, their challenges, and their resources, but two things that they share is their burden of proof and their oath. That's the thing that they share, and that's the thing that unites the DAs, and that's why they come here, and that's why they work so closely together, because they all carry the same burden of proof and the same oath. The creation of the DAs, I'll go through this pretty quickly, but after the judicial article, the DAs used to be solicitors, and they became DAs, state offices, after the judicial article in the 70s. And at that time, what happened was they had been county funded. It was a county solicitor. And then when they said, okay, you're going to be a district attorney, you have a circuit, and you have these responsibilities. We'll have circuit court, district court, and the state was divided up into a model unified system for the nation. It really was a thing to behold and that we were very proud of as a state. But the DAs really weren't funded. What happened was the decision was that, well, you get some county money, you'll get some local court costs, and that'll fund your office. And that rocked along until worthless check funds. And some of you have heard this, but in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, the number one reason small businesses went under in Alabama were worthless checks. I grew up in a small business. We had a small restaurant, and it was impactful to us. People would write checks, they wouldn't make them any good, and you sit there with a box full of worthless checks, but you had provided the services or the goods, and you're out. And so the legislature passed a law that said Worthless Check Act. So the DAs would go out and would contact the bad check writer, try to get them to pay the bad check. If they did, great. The merchant got their money, and it was pretty good. If they didn't, a warrant was issued and a fee was attached to that case. That fund, for the most part, kept the DAs afloat through the 80s and 90s, and really out of sight, out of mind. We weren't fully funded. The legislature gave appropriations, and we certainly had needs, but the worthless check was a substantial income for the DAs through those years, as were other funds. Well, when's the last time you wrote a check for a pizza? You don't. You use a debit card. Checks, you don't write those checks anymore. And that's a good thing. Businesses don't suffer that loss and have to go through that process, but it does have an impact. And I'll explain to you how that impact affects us in other ways as well. But there are, and this slide is really, really telling, and I want you to see the difference. Our budget for this coming year is $114,948,000. And we'll receive about 35% of our budget from the general fund. Now, the appropriation for this past session says $40 million, and we're grateful for every penny. And when I took over in 2017 in January, our appropriation was $26 million. We were in the quick. I mean, we were hemorrhaging. My first 10 days on the job was trying to make sure payroll didn't bounce for the offices. It was really in a bad way. And I want to thank you, the budget chairs and these committees, for listening to us and working with us to get those funds up. But I think it's helpful to understand that that $40 million is really kind of misleading, because what happens is this also includes the cost of being a state agency, and the salaries for DAs and supernumerary salaries that I explained earlier are going to peak and then start to decline. So supernumerary salaries and DA salaries are constitutional officers like yourself. And so we take that $40 million and we take $14,780,000 and set it over here. And that's for their salaries. And we don't touch that. That pays OIT for some bills they send us, some finance charges that we have to pay that are non-discretionary, and salaries for elected and supernumerary DAs. And so that leaves $25,219,000 to fund the local circuits. And so not one penny of the money that we get to run the DAs buys a pencil. We don't buy a computer program or a car or a copier. It's all salaries. At 25 million, it's all salaries. And so we're going into next year with a $74 million budget deficit. Now, will our budget total 114 next year? I don't know. Likely it'll be less than that. But we go in next year knowing that we have this budget deficit. Now, what does that mean? Well, I've got 13 new DAs that will be DAs in January. And some of those are assistant DAs that are moving up, and some of them ran from outside the office. But the one thing that they all share is an excitement for the job ahead. They're really eager to get in there and make a difference, just like all of you. I don't know how y'all do it. I sit here just amazed that, you've got to, Rex, you've got to know a little bit about DHR funding, broadband. You got to know about what's mental health needs and all that enough to cast a vote that you believe is appropriate for your constituents. That's a lot of work for you guys. And I recognize that when I come in and have a 10-minute meeting in the hallway, or I meet in your office and I hit you for 25 minutes and Kyle's great to talk with me about it, and I get 10 to 15 minutes, and it's just not enough to absorb that. Or if you do, poof, it goes away because there's somebody else in the office right after that. So if I leave anything with you today, I want you to understand that the 40 million represents two things: salaries, which we set them aside, and we're like not other agencies are like us, because if you were to cut us 10% next year, that 10% would be a 20% cut, because we take those salaries aside and apply the 10% to the remaining, making it double. Does that make sense? So the cuts are worse on agencies like us because of the constitutional obligations that we have. So you look at going into next year with a $75 million deficit, how does that work? Well, as I said, the supernumerary costs for next year we expect to be $6.9 million, and we expect DA salaries to be 7.8. There was an increase in pay this last time that impacted the supernumerary salaries and the DA salaries, and we're working, and these two figures include those figures. So now the $25 million, how is that allocated? How is that split? Well, I've got a handout here for you that, and I'll email it to any members that aren't here. And what that does is it explains how what our obligations are, as well as what we get from the general fund. So you'll see salaries. You see a column for the circuit for the DA's name and the circuit number on the left. Then salaries and benefits and operating costs. Those first two columns are totaled in the third column. So that's what, if you look at the first lines, first circuit, Stephen Winters, his total expenditures for 2020, these are actuals here, okay? These are actuals. I'm going to be talking about budget for next year, but I wanted to give you actuals so you could see it. So if you see Stephen Winters, his actuals for 2021 was $938,000 some odd dollars. His general fund appropriation was $411,000. Part of that separate part there. There is not a DA on this list that does not have a significant deficit after you subtract general fund from what their operating costs are, salaries and otherwise. Significant. I mean, in just the DAs in here, I look at Darrell Bailey. His total expenditures are $7.6 million. His general fund appropriation is $979,000. So he has a budget of 7.6, but he gets 900,000 from the general fund, which leaves him with a $5.6 million deficit. And it goes all the way down. Some are less, none are less than several hundred thousand. The lowest one would be in the 34th Circuit, but all of them are well over and several $100,000, and some are several million dollars. So you ask yourself, how do we come up with that formula for splitting that general fund? Well, the way that works, and I'll try to explain as quickly as possible because I know we're going over a little bit, and so we're you don't have a whole lot of time. The DAs were roughly $39 million back in the mid 2000s, $39 million. When everything happened in 2008 and subsequent to that, our budget, when I became director in 2017, January of 2017, our budget was $26 million. We had been at 28, and there was a kind of a hiccup. There was a mess up in the budget process. There was a interagency transfer from the AG's office back during Luther Strange's administration, $2 million to the DAs, which put us at 28. The next year, in 2016, that was neglected from being in the budget. So in 2017, we're at 26 million. Like I said, we're deep in the quig. That 2 million is not there. And so the legislature wanted to, because we had DAs calling their members saying, look, I can't afford, to try cases. I'm having to settle cases because I can't pay for an expert. I can't pay for a translator. I can't pay for trace evidence. I'm having to lay folks off in order to try cases. So the legislature asked us to take the each individual appropriation and try to reformulate that to help some of the smaller circuits, and which I thought was going to be an undertaking that we may not get there, but we did. I was really proud of the DAs working through this process. And so what we do is 28 million and below is split pursuant to a formula that goes back to the historic separation of the money. And the DAs were like, at 28 and below, that's a fair distribution, or 26 and below, excuse me. But everything above that, we reformulated into a new formula. It takes into things like caseload, size of the county, if you've got a prison or not in your county. And that formula assisted the smaller counties to get a different percentage of that general fund. So we basically have two formulas that go into that division. So that general fund split there is a division of the $25,219,000 based on an agreement between the DAs, and we revisit that every year. So we have 25 million, but our salaries for each year are in the 60 million range. So we're looking at 25 million of what we need for salaries, and our salaries are in the $60 million range. So you can see on here what that the general fund appropriation in the next to last column does not equal the salary and benefits in the first column. So we're at a deficit just in the salaries and benefits. The operating cost comes out of local funds. So you say, well, where does that, you got a $70 million deficit, where does that money come from? Well, what that does, it comes from, and this is a split of it right here. This maybe can help you a little bit to see this. And I hear from you a lot, and the public, they hate the fact that there's court costs, or there's a fine, or there's a fee. We went through several years discussing asset forfeiture and how we would deal with that. Well, what has happened is, again, not your fault, not any current DA's fault, but the decision was made years ago, and it has consequences, is when there is a downturn in the economy, or a judge doesn't order and waives court costs, or there's a lawsuit that causes cities not to charge certain fees or bail fees, there's a direct correlation between that and funding of state agencies. You've seen that with ALEA. The circuit clerks are much like us. And so 70% of our funding comes from these local sources. So if you look at that, the 13% of our funding is roughly, and that's give or take a 2 or 3%, because this is a statewide picture, and I'll explain that in a second. So if you take a statewide snapshot, 13% is general fund. Now, for some circuits, for DAs and supernumerary salary, excuse me, and then the admin fund is 22%. So the dark blue pie is DA and supernumerary salaries. That's the part we set aside. The red pie that's next to it, 22%, is the part of the general fund that helps us make salaries. And then you see court costs and fines, that's 15%, federal funds, 5%, county general fund, 20%, child support, which is contracts, is 8%, and then other funds, including diversion courts, would be 10%, and then restitution recovery, 5%, and then victim assessment fee and worthless check unit are now down to 1%. That worthless check fee, remember I said earlier, used to be about 70% of that pie right there, but it's not anymore. So what that, if you look at, for instance, at the 20% county funds, that's misleading because that's really about 5 or 6 DAs. We have 27 DAs out of the 42 that get county money. But it's $1,000, a few dollars here or there. There are the counties that, or the circuits that get significant county money would be Madison, Jefferson, Montgomery, Mobile, maybe Tuscaloosa to a little bit, Baldwin to a little degree, but that's not the bulk of their. But so the in Jefferson County would get a substantial amount of money from their county commission, which is again no guarantee. Every year that's a fight because you're a state agency, you're not a county agency. Why are we funding that? And so we go through that every year. We work with our county commissions trying to increase those dollars, but sometimes it's to no avail. If you look at the child support, that's 8%. That's only about probably 2/3 of the DAs have child support. DHR contracts with the local attorneys to do child support collections in some counties. Doesn't go through the DA's office, and that's a reimbursement. That 8% is a reimbursement for the lawyer handling it and the staff person processing it. And so, and then other federal funds are hit or miss. Diversion funds, again, that's 10% statewide. But if you look at, say, Shelby County, which has one of the largest diversion programs in the state, and in Montgomery, it has one of the largest diversion programs. Darrell, the DA in Montgomery, and the DA in Shelby County have very little income from diversion because the county funds it and the DA doesn't charge any type of substantial fee. So there may be a small fee, but or maintenance, but it's not a large fee. And in some circuits, there is no county assistance. So without an enrollment fee or something like that, you simply couldn't have some of those diversion programs. So that's kind of our division of our pie chart. Now, if you're not aware, we have a report that we're going to present to you at the end of the month that was in our budget this last year that we're working on that will have this information and much more specific. And if any of you have any specific questions after today you'd like me to make sure I include in it, just reach out to me and let me know, and I'll make sure that we include it in that report. It'll be much more detailed but this is important. I wanted to talk about our caseload.
Before
Yes, sir.
we leave that, Barry, if I might, the handout that you gave us.
Yes, sir.
That's just a reflection of what the general fund budget the DAs received from the general fund budget, correct?
Yes, that would
It
be.
doesn't have any numbers there reflecting the local funding or the other sources of federal funding or any other sources of funds that may come to the various and different DAs, correct?
That does not, but this does. You asked for 5 years of funding.
Right.
I have this. This is the last 5 years. It has our
No.
budget. These are budget numbers. You'll see that's 114,000 budget for next year. These are actuals. So the actuals for 2021 were 94 million. Actuals for 2020 were 94 million. So this has the actuals in it. So this has that information.
All right, good, thank you.
Caseload is really significant, I think, because one of the issues that we have that I'd echo what Nancy Buckner with DHR said is hiring and retention. It's really gotten to be a very difficult situation for us across the state for attorneys and support staff. But caseloads, if you'll see, just some of the headlines: violent crime rates rise across the state, murders, homicides, and I thought it was interesting what Nancy said about the workers and the trauma that they deal with, and that's something that that certainly we face every day in our offices. That when you're 2 years out of law school, and you've got to sit down in grand jury and ask a 7-year-old to describe in great detail a violent sexual experience that was with her grandfather, down to whether there was penetration or not. And you've got to ask those questions, and you've got to see those crime scene photos or go to those crime scenes and be part of that. It is a very difficult proposition for the 278 full-time prosecutors in Alabama that we deal with every day. We've all done it. We've all been there. And, when you see these headlines, it says Alabama officials are calling for more police presence. Birmingham violent July helps drive 22% spike in homicides. Those headlines don't talk about the carnage from the spraying of bullets into a house that killed a small child and what it does to a body. It doesn't talk about, the countless hours of meetings. Rex knows that what you do in meeting with families and going and holding their hand through the process, and what our victim services officers have to do and what our DAs have to do to work with these families. It's not, I remember seeing a headline one day about a home invasion, and home invasion is really such a clinical term. It was a home invasion, and it was out west here in Montgomery several years ago. But the family was terrorized. And I won't mention here what they went through, and what the parents had to witness their children go through during that. But that's part of the case. It's not in the headlines. It's not in the news. The news is a headline and we move on, or you see it something on AL.com and you scroll past it. But these are real events, real things that we're having to deal with that are incredible. And when you see these caseload numbers that I'm fixing to show you, it should be staggering. In Alabama, indigent defense, and I'm not saying that their numbers should be changed, or I'm not complaining about their funding. Please don't think that if it appears that's what I'm saying, I'm not. But I think for comparison purposes, it is important to see this. In Alabama, indigent defense, their policy is that they cannot. That's an attorney that either is part of a local program or is appointed by a judge. They cannot have more than 200 felony cases per lawyer per year. They can't have more than 400 misdemeanor or traffic cases per lawyer per year, or 200 juvenile offender cases per lawyer per year. And they can't have like a max out in each of those. It's a combination of those three. So they can't go to more than 400 of any of those. So any combination of those. Now, if you look at Alabama, our cases that we have, and these are just charged. Circuit court, 64,444 circuit criminal cases in 2020. All right, this is during COVID when numbers are down. They're much, much higher in other years, up to 80,000. And then right now, because we know that our cases are going to go up because we've got such a backlog that we're trying to fill. Circuit court, like I said, 64,000. District court, criminal. This is not district court property line. These are district court criminal. 142,000 cases, 17,000 juvenile cases, and 310,000 traffic cases. So that's 543,000 cases pending in 2020 in Alabama. I've got 278 full-time prosecutors. 278. I mean, when I go out in the public and I ask, how many prosecutors do you think we have in Alabama if we have 65 or 80,000 felonies a year? And they say a couple of thousand. When I talk to my counterparts in other states, they can't believe two things: that we have 278 full-time prosecutors, and they can't believe that we have to go out and run a small business to fund our offices. They cannot understand that the DAs have to run a small business out of their offices to fund 70% of their operations, or that our caseload is 1,900 per prosecutor. When I left Talladega, I had over 1,000 cases and on our docket, and the numbers have just gone up. And so we're looking at 278 full-time assistant DAs right now, and that number needs to rise. And it's just very difficult for us to do that. Salary and retention is a difficult proposition for us. In Walker County, the DA there, Bill Adair, had been a prosecutor for many years, dedicated to his craft, was assistant DA for a lot of years, has been the DA for many years. Bill wants to hire a young attorney out of law school. Bill would like to pay that lawyer $65,000 to come and be a young prosecutor in that office. The problem is that the lawyers can go to the indigent defense side and sign a contract for the same amount of money, $60,000, and be on the indigent defense team and still practice law, still sue people, still sue DHR, still do divorces, still do wills and deeds, but then do the criminal cases when they're called upon and draw the same money. And so, Bill, we can't find people to take these positions. And when we do, we're looking at folks that are, in Alabama, there's a rule. You can't defend a capital defendant in this state unless you've got 5 or more years active criminal experience. That's the rule. You can't be appointed to one of those cases. You've got some that are prosecuting that are, 2 years out of law school? There's no rule on our side. So we've got 2 and 3 year prosecutors out of school prosecuting criminal cases. Now, why is that significant? For this reason. Prosecutors have a special oath. It's different than anybody else in the criminal justice system. I'm not slighting anybody else, but the attorney on the other side has a client, and he or she's representing their interests. That's his or her responsibility. Is to represent that client. The judge is up there to make sure the playing field's level and call balls and strikes, just in a simple way to do it. The prosecutor has a much different obligation, legally and ethically. The prosecutor is supposed to represent everybody in the courtroom. Make sure that the defendants, we file motions, and when the defense they don't even file them, but we make sure they're done because that's what we're supposed to do. We provide Brady material. We're required to by law, and we do, and that's evidence that tends to show the defendant didn't do it. But it's our obligation, oath, to share that. So as prosecutors, we have a responsibility to the community, to the victim, to the law enforcement, to you, to everybody. And so if you're looking at, and obviously the 1,900 cases per year is an average, but it's pretty darn close. If you're, for Daryl's prosecutors in Montgomery, it might be a little bit different figure than it would be, say, for Andy Hamlin in West Alabama, but the numbers are they're still very close. It's still over 1,000 per cases. And we're going to do the best we can. But the problem is our job isn't just to get the bad guy. Our job isn't just to catch the bad guy and send him or her away. It's to make sure we're doing it right. So how can you competently screen? How can we make sure that our throughput is as good as it should be with this kind of caseload? It's unmanageable. It really is. And I think sometimes you just kind of accept what your reality is and do the best you can, and that's what our people are doing. But it's really not acceptable. I know it's not to you. I've had conversation with a lot of you, and I know you feel the same way. But it is really something that we have to be able to do better at. Our Victim Service Officer program, which y'all were gracious enough to help us with going into this next year, one of the things, kind of the deal with us is you provide us, say, $25 million of our funding next year. And then you say, DA, go get the rest. And that's a kind of deal we have. Now, when there's an article on L.com that says, Johnny had to pay too much court costs and it's too much and that's terrible and we shouldn't be making defendants pay court costs. I don't think there's a DA out there that says we love funding our offices off court costs, fines, and fees. That's not our preference. It is the reality. So when there's a bill up about changing court cost structures or going to something where there's tickets instead of warrants, those have real economic, physical impacts on ALEA, the clerks, the DAs drastically. And so when I stand up and say, well, we may have a problem with that. Well, so you just want to keep people, having to pay all these fees? No, I really wouldn't. I'd rather be funded straight up and not have these fees, but it is the reality. I didn't make it, you didn't make it, but it is a reality. So the Victim Services Program, VSOs, as I'll call them, are really vital to us. They are the people that work with victims, they hold their hands, they help them with counseling, jobs, mental health. There's so many things that they can do with our victims. And we have tens of thousands of violent crimes a year in this state, and VSOs are really vital in the recovery of those. You're very proud. I saw the DOC presentation last time, a copy of it. I appreciate y'all putting us off when I was a little under the weather. I apologize, but can't keep a good man down. And I saw the programs for offenders and when they get out and released and back in the community. And I could tell y'all are proud of those. I am. Ham is a good friend of mine and it does a really good job. But we really don't take ownership in the recovery for victims like we do currently for the reentry of offenders. And I really wish that we did because they're both from the same community. The offender and the victim from the same community. They're both economically generally the same, and they both have the same challenges in life, whether it's education, economic, family. They suffer just as bad. They may not be incarcerated, but the rape, the robbery, the assault, child abuse is just as devastating and life-changing for them and their family. So the VSOs, what we did was there was a fund for years that came to OPS, and remember, OPS is a small state agency I'm the executive director of. I'm the director of the DA's Association, uncompensated. It's a nonprofit association that has no employees, okay? Its role is to assist OPS in the DAs in training and those type things. So, but OPS, the money came through the court system, OPS, and it was a straight pass-through by statute to the DAs. That is down now to about $12,000 per circuit. It used to fund a VSO for every circuit. It has dwindled, and it's dwindled because of courts waiving costs and fees, lawsuits at the municipal and circuit level about costs and fees being and them being waived. So that fee that has dropped. So part of that agreement that you provide us a $25 million that we're grateful to get, and Barry, y'all go find the rest. We said, okay, VSOs are important. We're losing that program because what we were doing was making our VSOs do 20 other things. So they weren't VSOing very much. They were doing it when they could, but they were still doing other things. So we knew it was vital. We wanted to make sure we focused on it. So we got a grant. That's part of that deal. Y'all go out and get the other, whatever you're short on, we went and we got a grant. And we were,
Mr. Vance,
yes, sir.
if I might, we've got some folks up here that the other meetings and lunches and
Sure.
such. Can you wrap up in about 10?
I guess I can. I do it quicker than that.
That's even better.
Yeah. I just wanted to show this in the slide, and we'll provide this to you. And it shows 118,000 from 18 to 22, 118,000 victims serviced in Alabama by our VSOs, and how important that is. We lost the grant. We got some of that funding back for next year, which was really important to us, and we appreciate it. Another thing, two things the DAs do that I think you really need to before you leave is to understand this. We're also unique in that we're one of the very few agencies that go out and bring money in. We're the hands and feet of the court orders. We're the ones that go out and file the actions and bring in court costs, restitution. Yes, some of that money comes to the DA, but also funds ALEA, Head Injury Trust Fund, Crime Victims Compensation, other state agencies that get part of those court costs and fees that we collect. We bring in millions of dollars. So we're not, I'm sitting here asking for, we get 25 and we need more, but we bring in millions of dollars every year. Another thing that we do is in Hoover, National Computer Forensic Institute. You may or may not be aware of it. It's a partnership with the DAs. Joe Borg's office is something that we created several years ago with Secret Service. And this facility, I have 3 folks that work there. And in Alabama alone has benefited incredibly. We've trained over 700 officers, $6 million in equipment and software to experts in Alabama. There is nothing like this in the world. Okay, this is the only thing like it. An officer from West Alabama or Mobile or Huntsville can go to this school free of charge, paid by Secret Service, room, board, per diem, and the $50,000 worth of equipment to go back and be a computer forensic expert back in Huntsville, Marion, Alabama, or Baldwin County, no matter where it is. And they have the equipment and software free of charge to go do it. This is the #1 consumer of hotels in the greater Jefferson County area. That's the economic impact that programs that the DAs are having on the Alabama. So we have I don't know how many agencies like us that would bring in economic impact like this, but it is very significant for us. I'll end with this to say that as far as inflation. I kind of see, and coming from business, and my dad owned a restaurant in the 60s and 70s, and he passed away in 1992. And so I worked and lived through those 70s in that what they call malaise when they developed the misery index. I saw it and felt it. The air was thicker. It was awful. The squeeze on small businesses, couldn't borrow money. It was tough. So I see it, I understand it now, and y'all have a tremendous challenge ahead of you. But the DAs in that inflation world are squeezed. This is what my fear is. You have the impact on the general fund. We don't know, it looks good, but I don't know how that's going to impact y'all for next year and what you can appropriate. So is that 25 million? You know, I have an IV in this arm and an IV in this arm. And I'm getting medicine from both. And they're both keeping me alive. One is the general fund, one is those local funds, okay? So the general fund, it ebbs and flows, but right now we're grateful for what you're doing for us. Locally, it's heavily impacted by inflation and by COVID, people's ability to come in and pay. If you've got a choice between putting groceries on the table and paying a speeding ticket, you're gonna put groceries on the table. I understand that, I would, but that has a direct impact on our funding. The clerks, Aaliyah, everybody. So as people aren't able to pay fines and costs, which that'll happen, that's going to be a pull on us on this IV over here. It's been pinched off. Then you have the impact on crime. You're going to have property crime. When you have economic downturn, you have that property crime increase. And then you have, like I said, people can't pay. And then we also have our expenses. We have DAs have to pay rent. They have offices outside of the courthouse. The supplies we have to buy, all those type things. So all those things are very difficult for us. We've survived off of years with what I call gimmick funding. And we want to work with you to change that. What we would like to do is, I know you can't tomorrow fill that deficit, and then us do. I know that's not gonna happen next year. Okay, that's just not. But I'd like to work with you to work towards that. If we can increase each year towards that, and then say the bail bond fee, which y'all passed a few years ago. I know you don't like it. I don't like it, but it was passed, and it's a source of funding for the DAs. You know, maybe if we were able to increase the next couple of years to get our general funding up to where we can retain and actually fund our offices and focus on being prosecutors and ministers of justice and not having to run a small business, then we can turn that bail bond fee back over to the general fund. You know, and I think that's a good trade-off. It's a good business sense trade-off and something we'd like to talk about. But we'll have more of these details in our report at the end of the month.
Thank you, Barry. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
This concludes our hearings. We may do some more of this about in March, February. We'll see. I know you'll miss us, but with that, we'll conclude and adjourn. Thank you.